What's up, guys? Thanks again for checking out this episode of the Christian Jensen podcast. I was recently asked, did you really name your podcast after yourself? Hell yeah, I did. Today I've got Adam Chin on the podcast. This is the most fun I've had on my podcast yet, and I've had a lot of fun on my podcast. We tie in Star Wars, the hero's journey, and mindset and language all together in a way that is digestible and, most importantly, practical and applicable for you and your life. You're going to walk away with things that you can take action on today. So I'm super excited for you to check it out. And please let me know if you like it. Wherever you got to let me know. Drop it in the comments if you're on YouTube, Instagram, DMs, email me. Let me know if you dig it, because unless you let me know, I don't know. So enjoy this episode. I know I sure did. What's up, Adam? Thanks for jumping on.
What is up?
Before we had to hit record because we were going to dive down too many rabbit holes before we started. Before we dive down any rabbit holes, please share with my listeners who you are and what you do.
My name is Adam Chin. I am the co-founder of Enlifted. Enlifted certifies coaches in the practical tools to build constructive, badass mindset. And my business partner, Mark England, and I started this business as another company called Vocabulary about 8 years ago now. And we have since certified 350 coaches, and the business and the brand keeps growing. We have our podcast of our own. We have 2 employees on the team now, including a side, I should say, for Mark and myself. We've got we're having an event in Virginia this year. We just had a big event in Austin last year. So yeah, it went from an idea 8 years ago to people knowing about us. So that's what I do. I'm obsessed with mindset. I'm obsessed with personal development. I do like Star Wars, not as much as you.
Most people don't. Well, and if and you name dropped Mark England. If you have not listened to Mark's episode on my podcast, that was 2 weeks ago. So go back after you listen to this one, go listen to Mark. But yeah, when people tell me, when they find out that I like Star Wars, they're always like, "Oh, I like Star Wars too." And I'm like, "Hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit." I gotta figure out like how much. No judgment, because there's a full spectrum. But now I need to figure out like, do you like Star Wars? Do you love Star Wars? Yeah. And even people will be like, "Oh, I love Star Wars," but I'm like, "Are you on my level?"
You're like,
probably not.
Do you write Admiral Akbar fan fiction? Because that's what I do.
Oh, I love that.
I'm just kidding. I don't do that. But I mean,
don't get me too excited. I'm so down. Send it to me.
I know. I was obsessed with Star Wars. I'm a little bit older than you are, or maybe a lot older than you are. I'm of that perfect generation in the 80s when the toys were at their like highest peak. So in the 80s, Kenner, the manufacturer of toys, made this whole line of Star Wars action figures, of which I took them to kindergarten with me in my lunchbox. I was so excited. I had Han, I had Lando, I had Luke, I had the whole team in my lunchbox with Chewie in there as well. And my mom took me out of kindergarten early that fateful day to see Return of the Jedi when it first debuted in the theaters, and we went and saw it. And afterwards, I said, "Mom, is there ever going to be any more Star Wars movies?" She goes, "No, that's the last one, honey." And I cried and I cried and I cried. I should have been smiling. I wish George had stopped it at that last movie, at the Return of the Jedi. Instead, he sold it to Disney, and now it sucks. Sorry to rub it in, man.
That's all right. It doesn't bother me. I'm just happy for Star Wars, as well as like Lord of the Rings, has like angry fans, and like nothing's ever good enough. I am not part of that camp. I'm just happy for good stuff. And it's like, there's definitely stuff out there that I'm not happy with. A lot of the Disney Plus stuff in particular, I've been happy with. And it's like I go into it with no expectations. Like if it's a good story and it's fun, it's good for me. And a lot of people go into it wanting it to meet this like imaginary expectation, and a lot of people forget how hokey the original movies actually are.
Oh, they're very hokey.
I'm
They're
like,
extremely hokey.
yeah, so I'm like,
They're
let's
hokey.
not make it something that it's
Okay,
not. Like this is a
Christian,
movie for 12-year-olds.
Christian, we're going to go down this path just a little bit longer. I promise your listeners we'll get back to personal development and working on ourselves and being very positive in our actions and our thoughts and our words. Before we do that, I will say this as an older Star Wars fan, as a Gen X Star Wars fan, to I'm assuming you're a millennial Star Wars
I'm a
fan.
millennial Star Wars fan.
There was a time in which Star Wars content was so precious that every single aspect was thought through, was so perfectly crafted, even though it was hokey. It had that Joseph Campbell hero's journey backbone to it. Lucas had really invested heavily into that mythology. And then I think right now what you're seeing is a different attitude, more of a, hey, let's just put a bunch of stuff out there, kind of like with how social media and content creators, let's just put content, let's make content, let's not get too precious about spending 5 or 6 years on a movie. Let's just make content, put it on YouTube, see what sticks, TikTok, etc. So I think there's something generational in that let's call it a conflict between old school Star Wars fans and the more new school Star Wars fans.
Sure.
I'll rest my case there.
No, I think that's a fair assessment, and I'll push back a little bit. And so all of the new, I would say all of the post prequel Star Wars content has been lumped into one bucket inaccurately. There's one bucket, which is like those initial like 5 movies that they pumped out back to back to back to back. The sequel trilogy plus Solo plus Rogue One. That's one bucket. That bucket is undeniably blasted out quick. Of those, 5, really happy with Rogue One. I like parts of the individual movies. I'm disappointed that the sequel trilogy was not, it was so obvious that it was not planned out in its entirety. Now, another bucket is what's referred to as like the Mandoverse, and it's like the Disney Plus series. And these series have, this is super nerd stuff, but there's 2 guys at the helm of these series, Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau. And as you dig into these, you can feel that mythology that you talked about. And I've been really happy with the way that they've connected those and expanded and collaborated with the Star Wars universe. I'm not always 10 out of 10 happy. It's at times it's hokey like Star Wars, but I'm very happy with this, where they're at now, because it does feel like they've realized like, hey, this needs to be treated with a sense of I don't know, sanctity, I guess, and has to have some continuity and some purpose and some bigger story. And you can feel that they're writing a bigger story, and so that makes me happy about that. In contrast to, the sequel trilogy in particular.
Well, shall we actually transition here? That was a great segue to the topic of personal development. If that is what you would like to do, because there is something with what you just said that I believe unifies my initial love of Star Wars, your current love of Star Wars, and our commitment to personal development. And that's that concept of having a bigger story, of thinking it through. I mean, think about it. I mean, those same concepts apply to us personally. To have a vision, to have a goal, to have something that we're moving towards that means something. Like we expect that in our quote unquote content. Well, we also ought to at least expect that in ourselves. So we can go down that road a little bit more and talk about the words, stories, reality, thought model that Mark and I developed, and bring it back, and then eventually come back to the nerd stuff at the end. How about that? I promise.
No, I think that's
I will
great.
get even nerdier.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And when you said that, I thought about what, if I could have changed how they did the sequel trilogy. Because originally and I'll tie this into mindset. So the way they did it is they basically gave 3 It's actually two, but they gave three different directors like, hey, make this movie. And it's seemingly that's all they gave them was like, you get the second movie, go. And there was no direction. And what would have made more sense is if they had this greater direction in mind. And I use the word direction on purpose. And it's like, hey, here's this north direction that we're gonna go. You can take us there. And you can go however you want to go. You can go around this island. You can go, under or over these mountains, and however you want to take us through the journey. But this is the direction that we're going to go, and leaving room to pivot and change and create as you go there is a more productive approach, not just in those movies, but like in life. And a lot of people they either approach it from like they build those movies of like, oh, well, I just got to do it and I'm just going to do something. And without willing to pivot or change or have any direction. And they're like, well, why is this a mess? And then the contrast of that, people will over plan and they're like, I want this perfect, well thought out, exactly how I want it to be. And they don't leave any room to pivot or change or create. And they end up longing for this future that actually is never going to arrive, and
Yeah,
miss
well,
out on things that could happen.
when people say that this thing lacks life, it lacks vitality, which is that root word. Vita is from life, right? The Latin. So they mean that they're too constricted. Mark talks about being puckered, talks about being stuck. You know, so life is both going, like you said. I think it's a great concept of going towards a North Star. It's also about allowing yourself the relaxation, the flexibility to make those movements. Those pivots when you encounter either a roadblock or you encounter something that strikes your fancy and can lead to whimsy, and you can make a move that way. And it also allows for discovery. So as long as I think we have the North Star and we give ourselves that freedom to explore directions to get there, we're okay, like you said. But again, it's like life is not a science, it's an art, right? So you have to have the tools and the intuition to know how to get there. So I agree with you. We're on the same page.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's also like nebulous and more challenging than it sounds to like develop your North Star. Because I'm sure there's some people listening to it to where they're like, oh, my North Star is, I'm going to get a good job. Or my North Star is, I'm going to buy this house, or I'm going to start my business, or whatever it is. And I think your North Star, as you go deeper and deeper down discovering that, you realize it becomes more and more deeper and less specific. And so like for me, my a North Star for me would be that I want to die knowing that I tried, and that everything I did, I tried it. And it's like
Mm.
I won't die with regrets, negation acknowledged. So that means I want to die knowing that I tried. And that means there's going to be some things that I try that I just didn't like. Cool. I know that I didn't like it. Now what? And then I'm going to try things that I am going to like. And that's my approach for doing a lot of things.
Yeah, that's a good working theme. I mean, because when I say working theme, because when if you study storytelling and how to write fiction and how these like Star Wars, these great epics are structured. One of the things they talk about is that when you watch a really good movie or you read a really great book, um, it should have the feeling of like when you're reading it page by page or watching it scene by scene, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next. Anything can happen next. Like it's like unpredictable in that way, right? Yet when you finish the movie or you finish the book, you look back and you're like, of course, they had to play out that way. Like, of course, that's what it meant. And I think you see that in life a lot. I mean, I know in my life, I can look back and I can reconstruct it now, and I can say, I'm 46, so I can look back in my life and say, oh, that's why that happened, and that's why that happened. At the time, it was complete chaos, but it led to this overall thematic structure, and that's why I'm here. And I think that working theme that you have of like, I'm trying, like that's that fuel that's going to push you further and further to the next step. You're going to keep going because, and then, but you may in 10 or 15, 20 years look back and say, actually, no, that was what I was going with, but the overall theme looks more like this. And it all makes sense now.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation about this with somebody else, and I just lost my train of thought. It's just gone. It's gone forever. I love that though. I love that with the thematic. Go back to the theme with movies. I'm in the middle of or books. I'm in the middle of reading the Harry Potter books, and it's I'm paying more attention now to the theme that's happening, opposed to getting caught up in the specifics. And I find that I'm looking at that same way in my life as well, because I've developed the ability to zoom out so much that when obstacles happen, I can be more objective about how impactful they may or may not be. Because there are going to be things that happen that are just like totally devastating. Like a big one for me is like when my stepdad passed away. Like
Hmm.
that's totally devastating. There's going to be things in our life that will be, and I don't use this word flippantly, but like life changing. It'll like change us as a person. But there's many other things that happen day to day that we get so irate, upset about, that when you stop for a second and think like, is this going to matter in 5 years? Is this going to matter in 5 minutes? Okay. And I can respond appropriately and allow myself to either let things happen, let them go, fix it, whatever. And so as I'm reading these books, I I notice that, as the characters get into some sort of like trouble, there's these minor, each chapter has its own like obstacle, and it's a small
Hmm.
obstacle and it's frustrating, they overcome it. And then they get to a point to where they get close to the goal, and they're like fired up and they're like, we're about to get there. And every time, every book, it just feels like the world comes down on them when it's like right there within their grasp.
Hmm.
And before they get the goal, they have to change. Like they have to be more than what they were in order to reach that goal. And my last episode that I was just talking to with another gym owner is we were talking about how if God had provided us the thing that we have now at the time when we initially wanted it, we would have screwed it up because we didn't have all of those like trials and lessons that we needed to prepare us for that. And as frustrating that was in the moment, I'm glad that I got it when I did, because I'm equipped to handle it. Opposed if it would have happened 5 years earlier, like I don't know, I probably would have screwed it up.
Well, there's an easy, a simple science experiment you can run simply by looking at the lifestyles and the trajectories of the people who win the lottery. That's a horror story collection in and of itself. You see this time and time again. Actually, in fact, I believe there's a book that details all the people who've won the lottery because they get it with no work. And that change that you're talking about, I mean, we always say that that's, like if you research how to write screenplays or books or create these story arcs, that change is fundamental. In fact, that's the entire reason that the work exists. Someone has to go through either a series of transformations or a single transformation in one story, right? Otherwise, what's the point? Like, in fact, maybe you want the thing, but you can't get it. Well, isn't that the whole point? Like, isn't the whole point that I want something that I can't have? If I get it before I'm ready, well then, like you said, I'm going to screw it up, or I'm not going to appreciate it, or I'm not going to have the
Mm,
ability to wield it. If you give Luke Skywalker the lightsaber before he gets it, Obi-Wan shows him the saber, right? He gets it and when he meets him in the desert in Tatooine, right? But he doesn't know what he's doing with it. He's training with it. He has to train, but he has to lose. He has to lose and overcome challenges time and time again, to the point where he has to watch his mentor be struck down in front of him. and things aren't just bad, they're worse than bad, and the one person that could have helped is now gone. So I have to step up, I have to overcome. So and J.K. Rowling gets all this, of course, too, and puts them into the Harry Potter books. But these myths, these this structure exists for a reason, and it resonates for a reason. It's not just because we're familiar with it. Did you read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell? Have you checked that out before?
No, I know what you're talking about. I have not read it yet.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff goes back to recorded history, to the beginning of recorded history. Pardon me, and yeah, it's built into our brains. We want to, this myth of the hero's journey is there, and it's important to understand it not just as allegory, but like you said, but how we are in our own lives, what we have to overcome, and yeah, I'm still doing it to this day. I'm still overcoming things and challenging myself, and seeing how life plays out afterwards.
My favorite part of those stories, and tying it back to both Harry Potter and Star Wars, is they always start with, and even Lord of the Rings, they start with a call to adventure. And there's an initial hesitation, and for like Luke, like Obi-Wan is calling him to adventure, and his initial response is like, nah, I'm good. Like, I got my uncle here, it's comfortable, it's safe, it's familiar. Yeah, he says, I don't like the Empire either, but what am I going to do about it?
Yep.
And he, despite the hesitation, he takes that initial step. And when he takes that first step, he tells Obi-Wan, I'll take you as far as Mos Eisley. And I get this vibe that like Luke knows that like he's tiptoeing, because he could have just left Obi-Wan there, but he's like, I'll take a step with you, but that's as far as I'm going to go. And the funny thing with that is, like in all of these stories, after they take that first step, it's like they're sucked in and they're literally thrusted in. And now, as soon as you take that first step, you realize you're not where you were and you're not where what's next, but you can't go back.
No, no, and the call to action in our own lives. You talked about briefly when we first jumped on the call about your move to Florida and how you made that's a big move for you, and I think about the big events in my life. We take those call to action and we go through with it. We walk across, the divide. Well, it's usually a lot harder as soon as we walk across the divide. Oftentimes there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of ups and downs that await us. But we have, like you said, we've decided. And Mark and I talk about this a lot in Lifted, is we decide and then we keep going, because a lot of people decide, but then they are like, no, 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 this isn't this. And sometimes you make a decision and you see it and you're like, okay, that was actually the wrong decision. But oftentimes we simply give up because it is hard on the other side of the divide. Luke kept going. Harry Potter keeps going no matter how many times he gets smacked down by so many different events. He keeps going, and I think it's really important to know, the old Kenny Rogers, the gambler, know when to hold him, know when to fold him. And when you do make the right decision, even if it's going to be uncomfortable in the short term, to keep going. As a young man, even as mature at 35, I noticed that I had, that was over 10 years ago now. I noticed that I would make a decision that I would sometimes flake on. And at that age, I decided, I had a moment where I said, you know what, whatever it is I commit to from this point forward in my life, I am going to stick with it. I'm going to give it the full effort. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine, but I'm going to commit to it. And I think that's part of that call to action of the hero's journey. Are you going to commit to it, or are you going to dabble?
And there's such a fine line that most people don't have enough experience to differentiate between being non-committed and finding out it's not right for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't actually take enough steps to decipher whether that's the case. They will decide that it's not right for them too early. And I think
I
in
know
order,
why.
go ahead.
I know why. I know why, Christian. And this is one of the brilliant things that Mark has developed over the years is because we don't write it down.
Mm.
You cannot how does the old adage go? It's a business adage from Peter Drucker. You cannot improve what you can't measure. Okay, what does that mean in terms of my own life? Well, if I have no idea what the win scenario is, how do I qualify what my actions are? How do I measure the quality of the outcome if I have no idea what it is? If it's ambiguous, like if I make a decision and okay, how do I measure the success of this? I'm talking each small success as well as big success. Like we know what the ultimate success is: make a lot of money, marry some hot person, have a bunch of kids, whatever. Yeah, it's like the basics. Um, but how do I know? How do I feel when this is going really well? What are some of the milestones, and then measure it based on that. And that's how we know whether or not it's the right move. Because if I'm going down this path and I'm consistently getting negative results and then it's not working at all. It's for me personally. I had this experience. When I was in college, I wanted nothing more than to work in the movies, and I got an internship working on this film, The Patriot, with Mel Gibson, which was filming in my area. And I got to get deep in this production as an intern. I worked my ass off. I was like, I'm in the movies. I'm like, there's Heath Ledger. It's his first big movie. There's Mel Gibson. I'm working next to his daughter. This is so cool. And it's what I always wanted. But then I got in it and I took stock of what it was that I was actually doing and what this career would look like and how and what the path would be like and where I was in my life. And I was thinking, well, everybody here is a maniac. I mean, not everybody. That's a bit of a overstatement. A lot of people who worked at the lower levels were, let's say, substance abuse problems. There's a lot of manic disorders, that kind of thing. And my life at the time, I required more personal development. So I'd be able to combat some of that stuff. So I wasn't ready for that. So I measured that in my mind. I measured it in terms of this is beyond or aside from what I require in life at this time. I knew that much. So I went down a different path and sought that out. So, like I said, I'll reiterate. To me, so many people have, and me included in the past, have yet to define what it is winning looks like.
That's powerful. And what you pointed out is you defined what winning looks like both to you, like what does winning feel like to me, outside of like this particular thing, and if I pursued this avenue, what does winning look like in this avenue, and how do those two compare? Because I've gone through different ambitions. When at one point I was in two different bands in high school and outside of high school, and we thought we were gonna be touring bands, we were gonna be musicians. And I realized after high school that how much commitment that was taking, and we were still like we were not like successful. We were still just like a local band. We didn't even have like anything recorded, but just that alone was requiring so much commitment. And I had my son at the time, and when we would go to shows, I would go and talk to the musicians and ask them like, what's it like touring? And I found out what that life was like, living in a sweaty van with no food. And there were people there that had kids, they had families, and they're like, they felt called to that and they loved it, and they described all the sacrifices they had to make to do that. And that did not align with what my personal vision of success was with my family and the relationship that I wanted to have and how I wanted to spend my time. And that made me realize, oh, in order to be successful at that, I wouldn't be able to be successful at the thing that I want to be successful at. So that means that isn't the right option for me.
And you knew that intuitively. So let me ask you: was that a gut call? Did you know that from your gut, or was this something like from a cerebral perspective you thought out, or was it
I
both?
thought out. Yeah, I thought
Mm.
that out. I've been really blessed that growing up, my dad he was in like direct sales, multi-level marketing, a couple different companies. He got plugged into one for a long time, and he would go to these like sales conferences where there would be like a sales training. There'd be like speakers there, and they would be talking about personal development. And so I remember as young as like 11 or 12, like going to these events and listening to them. And, um, one of the first talks I remember is one of the speakers gave the make your bed speech. And, which if you've never heard that, essentially, if you want to be successful, it starts with making your bed in the morning.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his grandma told him, you'll never be rich if you can't make your bed in the morning. And because if you can't make your bed, if you can't commit to making your bed, if you don't have the discipline to make your bed, what makes you think you're going to have the commitment and discipline to do the other harder things over the long term? And so, with that being said, by the time I was, I don't know, like 20, 21 at the time. Um, so I had enough exposure to that I had enough consciousness about this area to be equipped to look at it that way. And I've always been analytical,
Yeah,
so that helped too.
that gave you a great foundation. A
Yes.
lot of people, are less fortunate. They come upon this information third hand, but that's a great foundation but you have to still execute on that foundation. You still have to take those lessons and actually and implement them, right? I was very fortunate as well. I met a mentor as soon as I left that movie. I basically smoked weed and worked at a big box store for a year, and then I just randomly met someone who introduced me to my mentor, who hired me. I didn't know he'd be my mentor at the time, but he was, and he's a personal development guru, and he was building a company, and I was able to do a lot of the things that I had planned on doing, working in the movies with him, doing corporate and sales and personal development training. But my gut said this is the right move. It's not as sexy as working on these large films that I had opportunities to go and basically PA on and work my way up, but it was the right move. I could intuit it because I knew that I would learn the right lessons on how to be a successful person from these types of people and this person specifically. And I made a gut decision based on that. At the end of the day, I think it's really important to get the gut and the brain working well together. And I've been really fortunate, that I have a very good intuition and a good gut, and I trust it. My brain's high enough capacity to where I can get that working smart. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff is comes from now I know is a diet, fitness, sun exposure, like that. That's good. It's mechanical and how we can get all that stuff working correctly. And then it's the stuff that Mark and I, implement, which is the mindset, making things really simple. Because a lot of stuff we're talked about so far, Christian, is basically, this kind of very global, very like very um, in some ways ambiguous lifestyle habits and approaches to life. And one of the things that I was so attracted to when Mark brought this work to me originally was his concept of keeping it so simple and making it repeatable. When I say it, I mean personal development. Like, so much of personal development is like, hey, just push through it. Jocko Willink. The sleep when you die. It's discipline equals freedom. It's like all these are great heuristics, and they're great to use to move us forward when we don't have a lot of time to think about it. But what Mark built out and I helped him develop was this concept of using simple words, just looking at the words we say, either writing them down or recording them and hearing them in our speech, or working with a coach and having them write it down for us, and working on them, and just seeing how those little words literally led to the day that we would experience, the thought that we could experience that would influence our day. And just doing that again, word by word, just like Harry Potter was built word by word. And then eventually she gets to a paragraph, then she gets to a chapter, then she gets to a book, and then she gets to a legacy of books and an epic tale. I think that starting at the very fundamental level of the word was just such a brilliant idea, and it's why people keep coming back to the work that Mark and I do.
I think I don't think, I'm confident that there is a spiritual connection that happens with your language and your mind. And that when you say that, I think of what Christians refer to the Bible as. They refer to it as the word. Or when God created the universe, he spoke it into existence. And these that there is a spiritual connection that happens through our language, and that is what makes us different than all the other animals on the planet, and our ability to convey and create with our words. And I think that's ultimately what was trying to be conveyed, in Genesis of the first book of the Bible. And when I don't think that that was meant to be taken so literally, though we could dive into that. I think what we were supposed to get out of it isn't that this was like verbatim how it was done, but that how it can be done. And that simply by manipulating and using your language, you will create, and you will create something that either works for you or works against you.
Well, that's, and I agree with you. I mean, you go back to, well, God's spell, right? Gospel, right? You have these suggestions that are implanted in these words that go back centuries or millennia in this case. If you go back even further, if you go from an evolutionary perspective, there are theories that have been out there for a very long time looking at the like what allowed human beings to become the alpha, the dominant apex predator on the planet. Are we are less dangerous as a hunter than big cats and things like bears and things like that. We have soft skin that's easily penetrated. Our bellies are exposed. There's all sorts of ways that we could have easily become extinct, based on our physical characteristics. But they say one of the theories goes that the reason that we were able to become that apex predator is because we are able to communicate. Because of one man versus or one woman, versus a tiger, is one thing. But if you can coordinate through communication, through words, and build in the words, start creating these ideas, these strategies that you can then signal to other people, and to, again, even somewhat more importantly, you can then also replicate over time, so people know these ideas become, the abstract becomes reality, and we can use language to then hunt that tiger as a collective. So you over there, we're gonna build this tool using this language, and we're gonna plan in the future. So these little simple words soon turned into reality, for the species over time. So whether it be a spiritual aspect like you bring up, or whether it be, more of a traditional, evolutionary biology theory, I think language, we it is underappreciated. It's under considered a lot of the times in terms of its potency and how it affects our lives. I mean, I would say that the great marketers, the great propagandists, certainly don't estimate the power of language, and I think the average person does. If whether I say it this way or that way, whatever, it's the same thing. Well, is it? And we can get into some examples of that, Christian. I know you've had some experience working with Mark in the past, and we can start talking about some common things and concerns that your audience may, experience from time to time. You want to do that?
Yeah, let's do it. So before we decide what we're going to talk about, again, if you haven't listened to that episode with Mark, Mark talked about soft talk. So we talked about soft talk versus solid talk with Mark. So if you didn't check that out, go check that out. So I would like to delineate and add upon what Mark talked about. And I'm thinking, let's talk about the other two pillars of language, with architect language versus conflict language.
Excellent. Well, there's actually three now, Christian. I'm going to exclusively reveal. We have three more pillars. We have the soft talk you mentioned before is number one. It's the easiest to digest. As a quick reminder, soft talk are words like maybe, probably, possibly, example sentence. Here we go. Maybe if it's nice outside, I'm thinking about going to the gym today.
That person's never going to the gym.
The person's never going to the gym. I'm going to the gym today. Just cut out all the conditionals, cut out all the maybes, could be's, possibly, almost, mights, all that stuff. Okay. Maybe if you don't mind, we can go out on the date next week. Good luck getting that date. The second pillar is negations. And the flip side of negations are affirmations. So negations are very famously George Lakoff, the linguist out based in Berkeley, wrote the book "Don't Think of a Blue Elephant." I believe the name is of the book.
The pink elephant.
It's pink or blue. It's one of those. He's a political writer, so it's either or a political theorist as well. So it's either the Republican or Democratic Party he's talking about. But blue elephant is the concept of, if I tell you to don't think of this, you're going to think about it. So if I want you, so famously from a social science perspective, if I wanted to tell you, hey Christian, I want you to think of something a certain way, and I wanted you to say I was like that my audience was pro gun, I would call you anti-gun. If I wanted to position you in a negative way, you don't like guns, but I'd put the gun in their forefront. Okay, first and foremost. So how this expresses itself in our day-to-day lives are things like, I don't want to feel tired anymore. Okay, what are you thinking about?
Feeling tired.
I don't want Timmy to grow up and hate me. What are you thinking about?
Timmy hates me.
So we can go on and on with this. I'm sure your audience is smart enough to get it. Is that if it may seem tiny, these statements, but these statements repeated over and over again, said in the negation, in the negative, will completely tune your brain into seeing things in a certain light. So what happens when you translate them are very powerful statements. So I want Timmy to respect me when he grows up. Oh, well, now my to-do list becomes very different. Now instead of not hating me, I want Timmy to respect me. Now, okay, what do I got to do to be a person that Timmy's going to grow up to respect? Well, it's a lot different than the list of things I have to do to have Timmy not hate me, right? So,
and we see a lot of this in the gym. People show
Yes.
up and they're like, I don't want to be fat and miserable anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, you've now unknowingly trapped yourself in fat and miserable until you reframe that. And that's why we see people that's a key to why we see people with body dysmorphia, is like, I can lose all this weight, but if I'm constantly chasing, I don't want to be fat and miserable, now that's what I see. Opposed to, yes, I want to be fit, active, and feel good. When now it's no longer, now that's what I'm focused on. And it's focused on where I want to be and a positivity, and I can formulate how to get there.
Absolutely.
And know that I am there. Like we said in the beginning, that defines my success.
It defines your North Star. To tie it back to the beginning, it's like, what is Luke Skywalker's? Well, I don't want to be a country farm boy who doesn't amount to anything anymore. No, it's like that could lead to a billion different things. It's not him becoming the Jedi that he ultimately becomes. I want to become a Jedi. It's like the hero's journey is phrased in the affirmative, not in what they don't want, but at what they're seeking.
He even goes through that. Now that you say that, in the beginning of the movie, it is, I don't want to be a moisture farmer anymore. And then Obi-Wan comes along and introduces Luke to what his father really was and what Obi-Wan is. And Obi-Wan is offering him a North Star. And so instead of being stuck and miserable like everybody else on Tatooine, he breaks out by reframing his story from, I don't want to be this moisture farmer on Tatooine, to, I want to be a Jedi Knight.
Absolutely. Completely different picture. Jedi Knight gives you one thing to shoot for, gives you one path to walk. Well, if you're ever lost, go back to that path. Not be that basically gives you no path, and also centers the mind basically on what it is that you don't want. So you end up, a lot of people who have their goals set in negation, they end up ultimately staying in that negation, because that's actually the North Star. It's the one thing that they see. The mind doesn't understand the word not, right? So the third pillar, which is It's the toughest pill to swallow. Woo! This one's a hot pepper, right? Is the projections and reflections. So a projection is a statement in which it projects personal, or pardon me, it projects the responsibility and the consequences of your situation upon the actions of others. Okay, so
Uncle
we
Owen
have
is keeping me stuck on the farm.
Uncle Owen's keeping me stuck on the farm. Uh, if Darth Vader would just stop being so evil, maybe we could actually have something nice here on Tatooine. But the Empire keeps us down. You know, if my mom, man, she's always telling me this. My dad did this. The people at work, they're always looking down on me. It's like what this
Projections
is.
are the victim mentality.
It's the key construct of the victim mentality, and unfortunately, what it does, it may feel good in the moment to blame someone else or to put the responsibility on some other thing. The problem is with projections is they siphon all your energy. Okay. So and it becomes very apparent when you translate them into what we call a reflection, which is an I statement. So let's steel man this real quick for your audience with a projection that. Give me a projection example, Christian, that has some legs to it. You're like, okay, I get it. I get it. I can see where that person's getting involved. Just give me an example.
Yeah, this is one I hear a lot from my members is I can't eat healthy at home because my family members aren't on board.
Okay, so we'll tackle that last part. That first part's a negation. Is the I can't eat healthy at home because X won't let me. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Um, you translate the first part first. So I can eat healthy at home. Make that an affirmation because instead of my family, you put because right? I will prioritize. I can communicate to them how important this is for me in the moment because I can demonstrate to them. You start putting so it's when you put I plus a verb, you change the verb so they won't let me. I think that's the
Yeah.
word you
Yeah.
used. So the family won't let me. I can demonstrate. I can communicate. I can be the person that can be an influence over them. You start to see all sorts of opportunities. And this is the key point, going back to our early dork talk with the Star Wars stuff, is the hero's journey. The hero is in the center of the story. When we use projections, we start to pull ourselves out into the periphery of the story. So the first three Star Wars films, the hero is Luke Skywalker. You know, the redemption arc of his father ultimately is the giant, the 6-part story. But the first three Star Wars films are the hero's journey. Luke's in the center. If I start talking about how the government won't let me do this, or my ex-wife's going to do this, or the asshole down the street at the post office, he wouldn't give me stamps, or all of a sudden I start pulling myself out from the center and I place myself on the periphery and I become an NPC, to use a gaming terminology. You know, I become a minor character in my autobiography. And I lose track of all the opportunities again to insert I plus action verb into it. Because even if you are at the mercy at large temporarily in a situation of something else, someone else, there's something you can do in the moment that has agency that can build yourself, that can build the situation you want. Again, we can go through example after example. So that's the third pillar.
Well,
Anything you want to hit?
I liked what you tied back to Luke Skywalker because again, if we look at Luke, particularly from Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan and Yoda uh, expressed to Luke that Darth Vader is the problem, right? And they're so focused on you need to eliminate the problem. And Luke instead approaches it from his perspective of instead of Darth Vader is the problem, Luke views himself as the solution. And in the end, instead of eliminating Darth Vader, Luke takes it upon himself to change Darth Vader, convert him from Sith back to Jedi, which then ends up taking out the Emperor, which was we know is the real problem. But the whole thing is that Luke changes from projecting the problem onto Darth Vader and projecting the solution onto himself.
Absolutely, and there's all sorts of beautiful poetry that's happening there with his father. Him essentially saving his father, rescuing his father. His father being the shadow side of him, and him seeing himself in his father, and him being able to conquer that where his father couldn't do it. But just, like you said, or was unable to until the very last minute. Um, but like you said, that's really beautiful, and how they position Darth Vader as being the obstacle. All the focus goes on how powerful Vader is versus, no, I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm the solution, and I'm going to become powerful in myself. In the Return of the Jedi, the third movie, he's back and he's a Jedi now. He's formidable. So it's hard to become formidable when you're speaking in projections, and your world's built around projections all the time, right?
And
So
even going, if you go super nerd, the original movie, and you could see it on the back there, was originally called Revenge of the Jedi. And when we
yes,
use that word revenge, again, I don't think George Lucas was thinking about Enlifted, but if we use it revenge implies projection, that we are taking it, to them. It's about them. They are the problem, opposed to Return of the Jedi has so many different meanings. Is it Luke is the embodiment of the Jedi? He is returning as a Jedi. The Jedi themselves are now back because Luke is a Jedi? Or is it Darth Vader as a redemption? Is he the Jedi that has
hmm
returned? And again, all of that revolves around solution based, opposed to revenge being projection, problem, external based.
Well, hey, listen, as a fan of revenge films, I mean, revenge films are fun, as those are different types of movies. They're ultimately generally empty, though, right? Like and even the revenge filmmakers, like the great film. I mean, Tarantino's one of them. He'll say that there's, it just continues. Like if they ever make a Kill Bill Volume 3, he says it will be one of the daughters of one of the assassins that Uma Thurman kills will kill her. It's just a cycle. It's an endless cycle, right? But where this returning, that's a whole different, like you said, it's a very deep and meaningful experience, and it has a lot of weight to it. Let's get to the fourth component of the Enlifted thought model, the language model, and that is called dramatics and moderations. That's a new one, so we've yet to fully reveal this one to the public, but this one's fun
Breaking
because this one,
news.
breaking news, right? This is coming out soon. So dramatics, you may have heard the dramatics like binary language before, like about, everybody's talking behind my back.
They always do this.
They always treat me like this. She's never going to be able to do this on her own. You name it's a binary, never, always, every, right? Is that really true? Is that versus
They sometimes do
she
that.
they sometimes do that. She often makes mistakes, even if it's rarely. You attenuate the word, okay? And you'll see, even if it's often makes, does that mean she always makes mistakes? She can often make mistakes. I often do this. Does it mean that means I currently do it often, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do it often forever, or do it always. So there's other things like, my oh man, my presentation was a complete disaster. That's another dramatic. Like taking something and amping it up to make a point. That was a complete and total failure. Oh, really? Was it? Were there 10 things that you learned?
And you
It
see
wasn't a
this a lot
complete and
in like political speeches.
oh
The other
yeah.
side is always like this. They never care about that.
Well, if you get into this work, if your audience gets into this work, they'll notice that this language stuff is, I would say, at its peak with politics, because it's very powerful. It's dark magic. I mean, the way to use words to control and shape opinion. There's a reason that the people who do this get paid a lot of money. They
You could use soft talk to lessen the blow of the dumb stuff that you do, and then you can use projections and negations to blame and blast the other side. And
Oh
then you
yeah.
can use that binary language always and never to, paint yourself as the solution.
Yeah, or paint someone with a particular label that means that that encompasses them in their entirety,
Mm.
you know? That is such a powerful tool. What did George is it George W. Bush that said this, or Dick Cheney? Is like, you have to tell a lie so big that people will then have no choice but believe it. and and you tell it over and over again. You tell a small lie, it's hard to stick. Tell a big lie, it sticks easy. And you do it with, again, conflict language. So again, without getting too political, I mean, again, this is both, quote unquote, both sides. Any politician that you cheer for or root against is going to be engaged in this language more than likely. So the trick is to be aware of it and to understand how this stuff is being used. And again, can we have control over how a politician or a political party uses this language against people? No, we have a choice on how to interpret it. And our own self-talk and our speech to other people, that's where we have ultimate control. How we tell our own stories, how we communicate to ourselves, how we juice ourselves up, before a workout or before presentation, or Mark's one of Mark's great definitions for identity is the story I tell myself about myself every day. So, the story I tell myself in affirmation, with me at the center, reflection, no soft talk, all solid talk. So it's all very solid. No binaries, no dramatics, right? So I have a story about myself in an architect language way that I can tell myself every day. Super simple, right? Um, and that's a very powerful thing. It's a very powerful thing to have as your North Star.
Whether you know it or not, your language is a North Star. And so we might as well figure out how to create language that works for us and be the architect of our North Star. Because the alternative is the North Star gets chosen, just via osmosis. And it only takes, one walk down the street to realize that most people have no control over their North Star and they're just walking aimlessly.
Well, it's certainly a cartography tool. Yeah, it's certainly a tool, a compass. It's certainly, language being this tool. What is to echo your thoughts? What does Tony Robbins say about something to the effect of, if you personally do not work on your mindset and what it is that you want to become, there are a legion of people out there. There's a legion of people out there who get paid a lot of really good money, like tremendous amounts of money, to figure that out for you. And so it's really important to take the wheel, and again, I Mark and I've come back to over and over again, the simplest way of doing that is with words. You write it down, you look at those words. You can keep it real simple. What am I saying to myself? Write it down the way you say it to yourself every day. Look at those words. Is there a better way to say this? Is the focus where it needs to be? Is it ambiguous or is it clear? Is it powerful, or am I waiting on someone else to change to make my life better? Or is it self-driven? And um, yeah, we see it. I mean, again, with the 350 plus Enlifted coaches that are out there using this material, I mean, they're seeing it in their practice. We see it with our students. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's part of what this podcast is to expose, you guys that are listening to this, and this is what I'm helping people do now. I started a little bit in my gym, and now I'm doing this, outside of that. And so if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, I'm convinced, and I can see where my language is going, and you need help with that. Reach out, let me know. There's always a link to book a call with me in the show notes, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify. You can always DM me on Instagram. But Adam, me, and tons of the people that I've had on the podcast, and like you said, 350 plus people out there, we've been able to increase the awareness of our language the language of the people around us, and that has equipped us to be able to interpret what other people are saying, how that impacts us, and then be the architects for our language and our lives to create a life that's fulfilling and meaningful.
Hell yeah, man. Before I let you go, Christian, favorite Star Wars character? You got to pick one.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Dang, that's a good one. He's my second favorite character.
Who's I'll tell you why, and then I want to know who yours is. I like Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan has his own redemption story. And throughout the whole thing, and Obi-Wan's an example of what not to do. And so Obi-Wan in the very beginning reluctantly takes on Anakin as his Padawan. And from the beginning, when they meet Anakin, he tells Qui-Gon, this is not a good idea. And lists all the reasons why it's not a good idea. Like he says, this seems fishy. He's too old. There's all these like reasons why it is outside of the norm to bring this kid on as a Padawan. It's outside of what the Jedi code is all about. And Obi-Wan is very much a Jedi purist and loyalist. And so Qui-Gon dies, and on his deathbed, Qui-Gon asks Obi-Wan, train the boy for me. And it's like, what's he gonna say? No? Like now I'm not, now I'm pressured into doing it. So he takes Anakin as his Padawan, and you see in the second movie, in Attack of the Clones, the reason they butt heads is because he's training Anakin reluctantly. And then by the third movie, it comes to fruition on like why this was a bad idea. And even with all that being said, Obi-Wan does his best. He tries to tries to train Anakin through it. And what I mean by like Obi-Wan is an example of what not to do is Obi-Wan could have stood up more and been louder and been firm on his gut instinct, and he was not. And if you watch the Obi-Wan series that just came out, that was him dealing with the guilt of feeling like this was his fault. And so then we see his redemption as him redeeming himself is living as a hermit in the desert, watching over the boy that they know is the only one that can, in their mind, defeat Darth Vader. We talked about that. That's not what that is. And guides him to do so, and realizes that like he needs to be the mentor that he was supposed to be instead of the mentor that he was pressured to be.
I dig that. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that is. Obi-Wan is a tremendous character. You know what? You may have convinced me to watch that show on Disney Plus, because I was somewhat soft on it now.
Yeah, it's not perfect. There's some things that like I wish they would have done different, but like I said, when I remind myself that even the original trilogy it was hokey, and as long as I approach it from it's fun and it's a good story, I'm happy. And I was happy with how they did that. I was happy how they conveyed Obi-Wan dealing with that, and they did it in a way that was unexpected. And so I was happy with it.
Very cool.
So who's your pick?
I'll give you mine. As I've become older, it's very clear Han Solo is my favorite character, simply because his guttural underthinking it is precisely what I could use more of in my life. Like, he is in this epic world of tremendous story arcs of people who go, who are either the sons, or the Anakin is like this Christ-like figure who's born of the Virgin Mother and all this. There's all these, and he's just this guy who's like this pirate who is. And by the way, Mark's a lot like this. Mark would be the Han Solo in the epic, where he just shows up, underthinks it, reveals his good heart, and ultimately becomes he keeps everyone in check with humor, with levity, and friendship. And that's a very simple answer. I love all the deep Star Wars characters. I think Yoda is really cool as well. By the way, I'm a huge Yoda fan. But for something, I think as I've gotten older, I see that ability to underthink things and just simply be in the moment, the way Han is something really cool. I tried watching the Han Solo movie. I really did. I gave it the old college try, man. That was so bad. Uh, so
Yeah, no, that's
sorry.
fair. I like that Han Solo, he's their anchor to reality. He is in the beginning, he is n- as about as neutral as you can get. He's not for the Empire. He doesn't like the Empire, but he's also not into this whole like rebel fight against the Empire. He's clear on who he is, and um he's not about all this, he calls it hocus
Yes.
pocus and nonsense, or simple, yeah. And he keeps them pragmatic, where uh Leia and Luke could easily get lost in the ideal and in this like utopic uh vision in their mind of where they want to be. And Han Solo reminds them like the world is, and in this case the galaxy, is not a utopia. It's not all, sunshine and rainbows on the other side of this.
Yeah, that is true. He actually is the most sort of gray area. He has the most nuance at the beginning, but he soon starts drinking the Kool Aid. Yeah, I dig, and Harrison Ford's the man. I just freaking thinking and us growing up, Harrison Ford was just the dude, man. Indiana Jones, and Star Wars, and all the other great movies he made, like The Witness and The Fugitive. Well, Christian, I'm glad we got to bond on some nerd stuff here, and thanks for being part of what it is that we're doing here, and having Mark and myself on your show. And I wish you all the success in the world, and thanks to your listeners for giving this a listen.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Adam. This is really great. This is a super fun conversation. This was probably, I'd have to think, soft talk acknowledged, probably the most fun that I've had on these calls. I always have fun, so I may be forgetting, but this is top. This is up there. Um,
Hell yeah.
yeah. So, like I said, if you need help with your mindset, if you need help with your language, reach out to me. And if you're a coach and you want to know all about like, this Enlifted that we're talking about, and you want to help other people, reach out to the guys at Enlifted Coaches. The website's enlifted.me, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Cool.
and then we can find us on Instagram at Enlifted Coaches.
Awesome.
That's with an E, Enlifted.
Enlifted. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you're ready to rewrite your story, get out of your own way, design a life that gets you excited to wake up in the morning and do something that you love, book a discovery call, and we will chat about whether mindset and lifestyle coaching is for you. Until next time, thanks again for listening.